Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the council meeting for Monday, January the 30th, 2023. Please rise for the playing of the national anthem, followed by a moment of reflection.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Carton bras et portez le paix, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Please be seated. And at this time, I will ask Councillor Garcia for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The land on which council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor. In this evening's mayor's report, there is a fair amount to discuss, so I will try to get through it as quickly as possible. For starters, I want to, again, express my condolences. Yesterday, we lost Hazel McCallion. Hazel McCallion was a longtime mayor of Mississauga. She passed away at the age of 101. She was the true definition of a public servant. She dedicated her life to her community, including 36 years as the mayor of Mississauga. Mayor McCallion was a force for municipalities across the province, and her presence will be missed by all those who knew her. On behalf of council, I reached out yesterday to Mayor Crombie in Mississauga to express our condolences, and at this time would like to extend those condolences to the family of Mayor McCallion. May her memory live on in all those who serve their communities. At this time, I'm going to look to Councillor Miller.
There you go. I had a motion that got deferred to this week and now isn't on the agenda, so I just want to do a quick update. As many people know, Liam Coward passed away at the end of last year. Liam was the chair of our first LGBTQ2S committee, 2S Plus committee, and was a volunteer and activist in the city. He sort of died tragically and unexpectedly, and I had a motion asking the city to work with the family to properly honor Liam so his legacy can continue to inspire us just as he did in life. But it's my understanding now that staff are sort of working on something behind the scenes, so we don't need a motion about that, and I just want to thank staff for taking that on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. A number of political items that I wanted to work my way through. For starters, I had mentioned to council last week, and I'll provide an update. I did have the opportunity, along with a number of city staff, to meet with Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing Minister Clark. We had a very good conversation. I want to thank Director York for being a part of that conversation as well. A very good conversation touching on a number of issues and concerns that our council has raised and that many other municipalities have raised, and looking at ways we can work with the province and partner with the province to be able to build the homes that we know we so desperately need. We also touched on topics related to affordable housing, homelessness, and the opioid crisis, and I expressed my concerns both from a city and a regional perspective on what needs to be done in those areas to make life better for all of those in our community. And I will continue to keep council updated as we have the opportunities over the coming months to meet with and speak with various ministers and ministries. Last week, I also had the opportunity to sit down with Dawn Mountain, Jessica Riel Johns, and Willow Shawanu from the Niagara Regional Native Center to discuss the City of St. Catharines' relationship with the NRNC. Under the leadership of former Mayor Walter Sendzik, along with council and city staff, the City of St. Catharines has taken steps to implement the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report for municipal leadership. We have a memorandum of understanding with the Niagara Regional Native Center, a commitment to work together for advice, education, consultation, training, and cultural competency for our staff and our partners. And as mayor, I will continue to build the relationship that the city has with the NRNC as we continue the path of truth and reconciliation. I very much look forward to learning from and seeking guidance of Dawn, Jessica, and Willow as we continue down this path. At this time, I'm going to look to Councillor Dodge for an AMO update, as they did have a meeting last week. Councillor Dodge.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we met last week for the first time for 2023 as AMO, and I'm just going to give you a brief caption of some of the things that we discussed. Bill 23 continues to be AMO's primary focus in advancing municipal interests in housing and homelessness are key strategic objectives for AMO in 2023. AMO will continue to identify and highlight negative impacts of Bill 23 to inform targeted course corrections and hold the province accountable for unintended consequences. And we heard from many municipalities on some of the forecasted budget that it's going to have on their budgets, and they were astounding at the numbers that were coming in. And then last November, the province introduced another Bill 39, the Better Municipal Governance Act, which will see a provincially appointed facilitator to assess the best mix of roles and responsibilities per upper and lower tier municipalities. And they did not have any further, AMO didn't have any further things, but I'd like to ask that we reestablish a committee that we had. I'm not sure whether it was committee, task force, whatever, but it was led by Councillor Kushner. I'm wondering if we could bring that back to the table again so that we can be ready for when the facilitator is going to be appointed by the province, and they're looking at sometime in February for that. And then another issue, I don't know, do you want me to talk about that now, or do you want me to wait for the offload?
Well, we can, let's hold that until the notice of motion.
Okay. So, and I guess, you know, when we were sitting around the table, you know, one of the things that was really apparent to everyone around the table was about homelessness, the opioid crisis, and you know, affordable housing and stuff like that. And everybody seemed to feel that part of that problem exists because of some of our healthcare issues. It's kind of like a full circle thing. You know, we have people that are homeless because of mental illness or addictions and all those things, and they're thinking that some of the breakdown is in some of the health services that are provided for by us to these people, and it's kind of a vicious circle. So that's just kind of a quick update of some of the things that we did discuss.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Dodge. And if I can ask as a direction to staff, if the report that came forward from Councillor Kushner, and I think it was a task force of council during the last regional restructuring debate, if we could have that report circulated to all members of council, just as a direction to staff to Councillor Dodge's point. Thank you, Councillor Dodge. All right, give me 1 second. So the request was for those at home. If Councillor Kushner could give us an update. Councillor Kushner, you should be able to press the button now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I look at the critique of our governance in St. Catharines, Niagara. It's the same as in 2019. And I'll just read a couple of critiques. Too many politicians in Niagara region, poor communication between the city and region, duplication between the region and city in business development, duplication between region and the city in planning development. With regionalized business development, the economy will do better. With regionalized planning, region will be better planned. With the city of Niagara, the region will have more political clout in Toronto and Ottawa. And the list goes on, so it's a repetition of what we saw in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. All right. So I will continue on with the mayor's report. There are a bunch of congratulations, which is fantastic and one of my favorite parts. So if anybody has anything to add at the end of this, please let me know. I did have the opportunity earlier this month to accept 2 awards for architecture at the Niagara Region's Biennial Design Awards on behalf of the City of St. Catharines. The first was an Outstanding Achievement in Architecture Award for the Walker Sports and Abilities Centre, which was built to host the 2022 Canada Summer Games, where we partnered with the Niagara Region, the City of Thorold, and Brock University. I had the opportunity to accept that along with Regional Chair Jim Bradley. And then the second was a grand prize in architecture, which I got to accept by myself without the regional chair, which I may have mentioned to him a few times, but on behalf of the City of St. Catharines for the Neil Campbell Rowing Centre, also built as part of the Canada Summer Games and built with our partners at the Canadian Henley Rowing Corporation, which I had the opportunity, as I said, to stand with Mr. Schenk and accept those awards. So congratulations to all those who were involved with the project. Earlier this month, I had the pleasure of attending the Marine Club's 84th annual dinner in Toronto with Director York as well as CAO Oakes. Since 1938, shippers, ports, terminal operators, and service providers have come together with a focused effort to promote and celebrate the industry. And the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway is among the most significant waterways in the world, providing efficient transportation of a range of cargo feeds. Industry in one of the most heavily populated regions in North America, and St. Catharines, of course, is the gateway to the Welland Canal and the further Great Lakes. So it was great to see our local Niagara marine industry connected at the event, including Heddle Marine, the Seaway, obviously. Hoverlink Ontario was there, and I know that is of special importance to many of the folks around this table, along with Fluke Transport and Stubby's Precast. Last week, I also had the opportunity to attend a celebratory wrap-up presentation from the Niagara 2022 Canada Games Host Society, which shared many of the highlights from the games and some of the successes. Some of the highlights included more than $350 million estimated in economic impact, along with almost 2,000 jobs that resulted from the games and another $117 million in economic impact. Additionally, both the ticket and the sponsorship revenue exceeded expectations, which puts the games in a budget surplus position. And I'm assuming that is in there because my chief of staff who wrote this section also happened to have a hand in the ticket sales. So kudos to Brianne for that. I wanted to extend my congratulations, though, to the whole host society for all of these fantastic accomplishments, and I look forward to seeing the work that Sport Niagara will do in their capacity as the legacy organization that's coming out of the games. And yesterday, I had the pleasure of attending and celebrating the 15th year of Momentum Choir at the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. For those of you who don't know, Momentum Choir is a professionally trained choir composed entirely of adults who live with disability. Providing enriched experiences of community, skill development, and devotion, Momentum Choir truly celebrates the power of music in an inspirational production. It was a great night of music and celebration for the 15 years supporting our community. And a few look forwards, one which I know is of great interest to many of our councillors as well. City of St. Catharines is embarking on a land use study to develop a vision and ultimately a land use plan to guide the future redevelopment of the former General Motors lands located on the east and west side of Ontario Street. The study, which will be the Ontario Street Corridor Secondary Plan Study, is centered around the former General Motors lands at 282, 285 Ontario Street, but will also examine the entire Ontario Street corridor from the QEW Highway south to Welland Avenue. The city's Planning and Building Services Department is hosting a public open house in which to present the study background, the goals, the objectives, and guiding principles, study components, timeline for completion, and also to solicit public input, which is the important part of this. So on Tuesday, February 7th at Holiday Inn and Suites, which is 327 Ontario Street, you have an opportunity to provide feedback. The doors will open at 6:30 p.m. The presentation begins at 7 and will be followed by a question period. For further information, questions, or comments, please contact the project team. You can head over to engagestc.ca/Ontario Street Study, or you can email Ontario Street Study, all one word, at stcatharines.ca. Alternatively, you could look at the social media feeds of both Councillor McPherson and Councillor Ratzlaff, who I know have been very active in posting about that meeting upcoming to the community. Save the date for the annual Tuke Tuesday Mayor's Pancake Breakfast on February 7th from 7 to 9 a.m. at Market Square. This is the first one since 2020 in support of Community Care's housing program and Raising the Roof. I'm looking forward to having you join us for a delicious pancake breakfast and to purchase a toque in support of these great causes. And I have it on good authority that from 7:30 to 8:30, princesses and superheroes will be there. So if there are any young kids in the community who can cajole their parents out of bed before they go to school, that's the window. Coldest night of the year is on February 25th. And I'm hoping many of us around council will be able to join me for the coldest night of the year, which is described as a winterific, family-friendly walk to raise money for local charities, serving people experiencing hurt, hunger, and homelessness. Join Canadians from coast to coast for a cold walk that makes a big difference. The money raised in St. Catharines supports Start Me Up Niagara, which we know does a lot of work dealing with issues around addictions and mental illness, poverty, homelessness, and unemployment. Visit cnoy.org for more information and to sign up. And finally, my favorite part. Last Friday, I got to go to the Polish Society's Fish Fry. The Polish Society hosts fish fries every Friday. On this Friday, apparently I'm going to one at the Grantham Lions Club. So any of those friends in Grantham who want to come out will be there. I've found a number of different fish fries to add to the growing list of deep fried fish goodness. I recently found out the Club Roma also hosts a fish fry, so I will be attending that at some point. Check out upcoming dates and visit their website at clubroma.ca. And if fish isn't your thing, Club Roma is also hosting a gnocchi night taking place on February 24th. I've gotten some good advice from former Mayor Rigby. His advice is every event have one course. So you go to one place for the appetizer, you go to one place for the main, and one place for the, don't try and eat it all at each individual event. Does anybody have anything they would like to add to the mayor's report today? Councillor McPherson, just give it 1 second. I'm putting it in the Wild West mode so that it's just easier for everybody. You should be good.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Just three little updates. The Downtown Association and the Performing Arts Center are working together for Black History Month to give away a pair of tickets to performances and films at the PAC all month long. The Downtown Association is creating and has created a special section on their website highlighting the over 20 events, workshops, and many other things happening in the heart of the city for Black History Month. And finally, the Downtown Association has created a special, very special, Facebook community group, which is a positive place for the community to connect with each other and businesses to build awareness and discovery. And everyone who joins the Facebook group in February is automatically entered into a draw to win Ice Dog tickets.
So I joined that group today. Does that mean I'm not entered to win Ice Dog tickets?
You have season's tickets, don't you?
Right. Yeah, I mean, rules are rules.
I've got no response to that. Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Is that everything?
That is it.
Excellent. Councillor Harris, this may be the item that I was going to mention.
Well, no, actually, I don't think it is. I just wanted to mention about that award for the Neil Campbell Rowing Center. It's actually the Neil Campbell Rowing Center powered by Electra. And it probably wouldn't have been possible without the contributions from Electra and their expertise, so I just thought I'd mention it. And if you want to mention a goaltender, feel free.
I am going to just very briefly mention the fact there was a goaltender at the Canadians CHL Top Prospects game by the name of Charlie Robertson this past weekend. He does have a local connection. I'm going to let you describe the local connection, but he is definitely tied here. He plays for North Bay. Thankfully, he was not in the lineup on Saturday night because he probably would have had even more success against us than their goaltender they did play had. So, but I'll turn it over to you, Counselor.
We're going to take ownership of him. His grandfather's Tom Rankin, so he was very proud of him and watched that event, and I think he stopped 11 out of 13 shots, so chances are he'll be drafted next year.
He did have an exceptional write-up in all of the reports from the top prospects game, so kudos to the Rankin family for another young star coming up through the ranks. Counselor Williamson.
Yeah, on the vein of hockey players, we did lose Bobby Hull today, who has a significant St. Catharines connection and won a Stanley Cup, and was quite an interesting and accomplished hockey player with perhaps the hardest slap shot ever, and certainly changed the way the game was played. And that's when goalies started getting masks, of course. And he did come back and had connections with St. Catharines, as did his brother Dennis, of course.
Am I correct in saying that he went to collegiate?
Yes, he did, yeah.
Okay,
Played
'cause
football and junior hockey.
I was about to say, I saw a clipping from St. Catharines Collegiate has a wonderful Facebook presence, and I saw a clipping from this past weekend, obviously from many, many years ago, Bobby Hull scoring 3 touchdowns for the collegiate senior football team in a game, which I think speaks to just how athletically gifted many of these athletes were in previous years. So, and condolences to the family, friends, and to the community, because that's a loss. Councillor Miller.
Sorry, just quickly. Today I had the opportunity to attend a Mums Against Overdose awareness event that was at the lawn of City Hall. It was a little last minute coming together, so they didn't publicize it too much, but it was a difficult but good experience to talk to some mothers who've lost their children to overdose, and they have said that they're going to be back every couple months with these awareness events at City Hall, and certainly recommend all my colleagues to make it out if you can when those come up. So I think the next one's around March 14th.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. So we are expanding our circle of trust, and I believe the CAO would like to add to the mayor's report today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take the opportunity to publicly acknowledge a few staff who, we had an incident a few weeks ago at the Kiwanis Aquatic Center, and our aquatics team did an amazing job to help the patron get the help he needed in order for EMS to arrive and move forward. So I just want to personally thank Haley Lobsinger, the head lifeguard on duty, Jessica Scott, Brenna Carroll, Cameron Wilson LaPlante, Brandon LeBold, Sydney Jewel Godswart, Kura Cooper, and Joanne Botley. They were all our lifeguards and staff on duty during the incident. Did an amazing job. It's a very difficult situation dealing in that situation, and they did unbelievable. So I just want to send a note of gratitude on behalf of myself and our senior leadership team and the entire corporation of thanks, along with the family who they helped to deal with the issue for the individual. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Very well deserved. I will just ask, and everybody who provided content for the mayor's report that I did not originally have, if you want me to put it in, I usually do the mayor's report video on Tuesdays after the meeting, so if you want to fire me a quick brief email with like a paragraph or a few sentences, just so I remember to put it in. With that, seeing no more, I will turn off the Wild West mode, and I will look to the clerk for the adoption of the agenda.
So today there's 2 amendments that have been brought forward by staff for today's agenda. The first is item 14.1. That's the closed session regarding 320 Geneva Street. That's removed from the agenda and will be brought forward at a future meeting. Staff are planning and preparing to bring that forward at the next meeting on February 13th. The second is an additional bylaw regarding a bylaw to amend bylaw number 89/2000 entitled "A Bylaw Regulating Traffic and Parking on City Roads." That's being added to the adoption of the approval of the bylaws section, so it's item 16.2. And there's one item of additional correspondence that's in Council Sugar Sink folder, and that's a memorandum from the Director of Financial Management Services and City Treasurer. It's regarding percentage tax rate increase for city residential portion over the last 5 years.
All right, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Deputy Mayor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Kushner. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next is the adoption of minutes. The council adopt the minutes of the special meeting of council held on January 9th, 2023, and the council adopt the minutes of the meeting of council held on January 16th, 2023. Can I have a mover, Councilor Harris, and a seconder, Councilor Lindell? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councilor Williamson?
9.1, it's a family matter connection. Thank you, personal.
Thank you, Councilor. Are there any other declarations of interest this evening? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5, which is a motion to move consent reports. Nothing has been requested to be moved from consent to discussion. So moving the motion to approve the consent agenda, I have Councilor Williamson, and I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Today's consent agenda includes item 6.1, Planning and Building Services, demolition permit for a designated heritage property in the Port Dalhousie Heritage District. And item 6.2, Legal and Clerk Services, Council Correspondence. Councilor Williamson.
Yes.
Councilor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councilor Phillips.
Yes.
Councilor Townsend.
Yes.
Councilor Miller.
Yes.
Councilor Lindell.
Yes.
Councilor Harris.
Yes.
Councilor McPherson.
Yes.
Councilor Kushner. Yes. Councilor Garcia.
Yes.
Councilor Dodge.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
So number 7 is public meetings. There are none. Number 8 is presentations. There are none. So we will move directly to item number 9 and the discussion reports. We have 9.1 Malcolmson Eco-Park, northernmost part of the park. This was requested by Councilor Phillips. And we have a recommendation that the naming policy, parks, trails, and recreation facilities be waived and that the northernmost part of the park be named the Ethel and Cyril Williamson Memorial Park. That's moved by Councilor Phillips. Do I have a seconder? Councilor Dodge. And I will look to Councilor Phillips to speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure council has read the letter from Mr. Eckert, who is the former chair of the Friends of Malcolmson Park, requesting that council consider naming the new, it's a parkette actually at the end of the trail, or the Welland Canal Trail, at the north end of the canal as the ships exit Lock 1. It's a very small lookout point with a couple of benches there, and people can go and sit and watch the ships enter or exit the canal. Ethel and Cyril Williamson were lighthouse keepers at looking after the lighthouse at the point as the ships came in and exited the canal, making sure that the lighthouse was in good shape to make sure the ships were could safely see the lighthouse and enter the canal. It is being suggested by Mr. Eckert and supported by the Friends of Malcolmson Park. I spoke with Doug Walls, the chair of the Friends, and they're firmly behind this, that the park be named the Ethel and Cyril Memorial Park at the end. And as I said, they were there for over 25 years looking after that. Mrs. Williamson actually wrote a book called A Light on the Seaway, and it's a real historical name, historical area. So I'm recommending, normally we would refer this to staff, but in talking with Director Christie, he said if we did that, it could take upwards of 6 months or longer for this to be in place, given the things they have to do. So I'm suggesting tonight that we waive the naming policy in this case. I normally wouldn't do this, but I can't imagine any other name going forward in such a case for this spot. So I'd like to ask that we vote on this tonight as a council, that this go forward immediately.
Thank you, Councilor Phillips. So we'll just ask, I've got Councilor Kushner, Councilor Townsend, if you just want to Okay, so I'll go to Councilor Phillips, if you can just turn off your mic, and I'm going to make sure I do this right. Councilor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the recommendation is very valid, but I'm very hesitant to talk about people in public. I think we should go into camera and in case there are any negatives, and then come out and vote publicly.
All right, so we have a motion to go in camera. All those in favor? Opposed? All right, so I believe this would be identifiable individual, but I'll turn it to the clerk.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the reason to go in camera is included, just for the reference, that it is about identifiable individuals, including local and board employees.
All right, so at this time, we're going in camera, which I believe means we have to head into the back room, which means we have to kick whoever's in there out. So we'll be back. We are resuming from the in-camera. There will be a motion arising. It is the motion that will be up on the screen. I did have Councillor Townsend, so I will open it up to Councillor Townsend next, whose comments do not pertain to the in-camera portion. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my question pertains to, we seem to go through this every few meetings with naming of parks, benches, whatever it might be. Is there a policy on this? And this is no disrespect to the individuals. I just want to understand. I get emails all the time from residents asking to do memorial benches, and you know, my heart goes out to anyone who has lost a loved one. But yeah, simply asking the question of have we put forward a policy yet? Has staff come up with one in naming parks? And
I see Mr. Christie nodding his head, so I will turn things over to Mr. Christie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor, we do have a policy to name parks, parkettes, and those types of city-owned assets. The policy identifies that can go one of two ways. Either council directs staff just to outright name an asset, or to go through the process of naming it. And to go through the process means to go through we would go out to the public and seek out names that members of the public would bring forward. We would do a vote. We would, there's two steps there. We would, whittle down the most popular names, go back out to the public, and so on and so forth. So the difference here is that council can override that second option, but there is a policy.
okay, thank you for that. Has there ever been a time where, through you, Mr. Mayor, where the city has had a committee to determine whether a resident gets on any type of memorial bench or wall? And the reason, just to review this, the reason I bring this up is because Councillor Garcia will know, sitting on the Performing Arts Center, we did have a similar issue where, name, for example, had to be removed. I'm just trying to understand if it's something that maybe we should look at doing, as having a committee struck to have people review as to whose names go forward, and basically to acknowledge what their accomplishments have been to the city.
I will say, as Mr. Christie formulates his thoughts, I know with respect to street naming, the Heritage Committee has taken that on in the past and has put together lists of significant individuals. So that list does exist, and I will just take a moment to give a plug to those members of the Heritage Committee who've devoted time to that, because it can be a very long and difficult task, but it's good work, and I've seen the list in the past. I've seen the additions that have gone on to it. With respect to the idea of what Councillor Townsend put forward, Mr. Christie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We've never used a working group like that, Councillor. We certainly do, we can do sort of background information checking. It's not usually part of the process for us per se, because most of the time the names that are brought forward to council are already on the list of significant names. In this case, I'm not sure if those names are on that list or not, but typically the names that are brought forward are already on a list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I have Councillor Dodge next.
Thank you. Through you to staff, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if you could just give a general update on how someone would go about requesting that someone were to be put on that list that the city has.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it usually goes through the Heritage Committee. That's the work of the Heritage Committee. So they would do that background, and they would add the person's name to that list.
Okay, so if say I wanted to put someone's name on that list, I would contact someone from the Heritage Committee, or would I? That's.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that's, I don't know if there's a staff liaison, Councillor. I can find that out for you and get back to you.
Okay, that might be interesting to know for people, so that they have people in mind, they can, put that forward. Thank you.
I will say we do have two resident heritage experts in Councillor Garcia and Councillor McPherson, so if you ever would like, they have excellent contacts with the Heritage Committee. I do see Councillor Harris hasn't pressed his button yet. There we go.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Community Recreation and Culture Services, just to touch on what Councillor Townsend was saying. So do we actually have a naming policy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes.
I guess Is there any way we could get clarity or maybe expand on it? What is the criteria? Because who decides what the criteria? I understand the Heritage Committee, but do you need to donate a certain amount of money? Do you need to be a community leader? Like,
So-
what exactly is it?
Can I suggest maybe we could ask that the policy be circulated to council?
That would be wonderful.
Excellent. So we'll take that as a direction to staff that the policy be circulated to council tomorrow so that council has a better idea. And if there are concerns about what that policy looks like, we can bring them back to the next or future council meeting and have a discussion.
That would be perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions, comments, concerns, or queries, I will simply say that I appreciate this coming forward, and I will be happily supporting it. I look to the clerk to call the roll.
So on the motion, we have Councillor Phillips,
Yes?
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Harris, Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
and Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
And that's carried. And Mayor Sisko.
Yes.
And that's carried.
I thought maybe we had spontaneously changed the procedural bylaw and I didn't have to vote anymore, which would have been wonderful. Such a good idea when I proposed making the mayor vote 10 years ago. Who'd have thought I'd regret it? Just kidding, I don't regret it. 9.2, Community Recreation and Culture Services, Business Planning and Strategic Services, the Merritton Ward Splashpad, Washroom, and Sun Shelter. Moving this motion, I have councillors, I feel like I should make councillors Miller and Lindell sort of argue over it. I'm going to go with Councillor Miller and second with Councillor Lindell on this one. So it's up on the screen. Councillor Miller, would you like to speak first to the motion, or would you like to reserve your speaking rights to last?
Yeah, I want to hear what.
Okay, so I'm just going to turn off the voting mode because I neglected to do that. And then, yep, Councillor Harris, you'll be up in a moment. So Councillor Harris followed by Councillor Townsend.
I think this is a wonderful thing. I'm just wondering, would it be possible to perhaps have engineering, like perhaps Daryl or Anthony, look into maybe the opportunity to incorporate some sort of refrigeration into that before we actually do that, so you could have an outdoor rink? Like just for budgeting purposes, because you might find out you could incorporate it right off the bat.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, we could look at the possibility of adding it and what the costs associated with doing such.
I believe there's a company in Oakville that provides those services. That's it.
So I'm going to jump in here because if we're going to do that, would I be correct in assuming that we would actually have to refer?
I'm just looking to see if it could come back, because if it turns out it's actually worthwhile, maybe we can do something.
I understand, I like the idea actually, but I'm looking to Mr. Martuccio. Could we pass this and move forward with this? Would it be possible to have a supplemental report come back, or would what Councillor Harris has suggested, would that alter this to the point where we shouldn't be passing this evening?
To you, Mr. Mayor, the cost associated with implementing a refrigeration system will affect the capital cost for the project. So if the direction or the will of council is to move forward with something like that, we would also have to be able to identify funds in order to support such a venture.
But
I realize that. I guess my question has more to do with the timeline. Would looking into that alter the timeline to get started? Because the goal was Q3, Q4 build this year, correct?
To you, Mr. Mayor, it could alter the timeline. Staff have not started on the project. We are actually waiting for a decision to be made on this before we issued the RFP, just to ensure that it incorporated everything that council wanted.
So coming back with a supplemental report as Councillor Harris is requesting wouldn't change the timeline. Then you could accomplish that in the time and still stick to the timeline? With the decision being made about capital funding, if council decided to go in a different direction and add refrigeration to be made in the interim?
To you, Mr. Mayor, the timing for the project would be delayed.
How much?
It would depend on what the final direction is. If there was capital funds that could support doing the work and we could identify those funds in the 2023 budget, then staff could continue working on that. But if we have to defer it to a future budget, then it would delay the project.
I'm just,
Councillor Harris?
I just want to put it on the radar because we always talk about community ice rinks. It might be an opportunity to put the refrigerant piping underneath the concrete pad right at that time, have removable objects that are in the ice pad or in the splash pad. I think it wouldn't be a stretch to suggest that you could probably reach out and find out if it's a possibility and still fit in with all these timelines. I'm just...
Okay, so then could I make a suggestion, Councillor, that you want to add an amendment that staff report back on the feasibility and costs associated with adding refrigeration capacity?
That sounds very good.
I'm looking to the mover and the seconder. Are we okay with that additional report request? Wonderful. So that's a friendly amendment, which will be added, that staff report back on the feasibility and the costs associated with adding refrigeration capacity. I'm a wordsmith. All right, I've got Councillor Williamson, followed by Councillor Dodge, Councillor Lindell, Councillor Townsend, and then Councillor Phillips. So I will go to Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would like to add an amendment to the report. Does talk about the opportunity to capture or recycle the water. I would like to know what additional costs would be involved in doing that, and I'd be lean to be supportive if they're not too outrageous. Thank you.
Okay, so additionally that, and we're going to ask that that get added in because I believe based on the way the report was written, that information, we already have that information, so it can come back as a part of the refrigeration report.
Or recycling or storage, maybe. Or
Councillor Miller, that's acceptable. Councillor Lindell, he said yes. So, okay. It's just additional information, and I'd appreciate the additional information as well, frankly.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll go to Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, actually, that was one of my questions I had as well, but good question. Another question, in the report, they talked about the fact that Port Dalhousie was the only other ward in the city that doesn't have a splash pad. What time frame are we looking at for them? And could we not do both of them in the same year? Maybe it would be budget friendly to get a better deal, 2-for-1 sort of thing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the aquatic strategy that was approved by the previous term of council identified this as phase 1, Lyndon Schooley Pool renewal as this phase 2, and then Port Dalhousie Splash Pad as phase 3. So we spaced them out because of our budget pressures, capital budget pressures, and operating budget pressures as well.
Okay, so I'm wondering, like, I know we not too long ago spent a lot of money on Lyndon School Pool. Would we be able to put that off and maybe put the splash pad in Port Dalhousie and then go back to that? I know that maybe the ward councillors won't be crazy about that, but I'm just wondering, and then every ward would have a splash pad.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we identified Lyndon Schooley as phase 2 because of the deficiencies of the pool itself. It's not accessible, it's not heated. You know, it's the same as the other pools that we have, and it's also the busiest pool that we've got. So we wanted to be able to serve a larger audience, if you will, Councillor, and that's why we timed it that way. Unfortunately, I mean, we'd love to do them all as soon as possible, but yeah, that's how the timing was rolled out in that report.
Okay, so what are we looking at for time-wise for Port Dalhousie then?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it's 2025 or 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Lyndon Schooley is listed as 2024, Port Dalhousie Splash Pad is 2025, and then we have the Port Dalhousie Pool is 2026. All right, we have Councillor Lindell, followed by Councillor Townsend, and then Councillor Phillips. Councillor Lindell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to city staff, what criteria did you use to figure out that parking wasn't necessarily something that was needed immediately, in that in the report it says that minimal amounts of people are expected to drive to the splash pad?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the background study that staff did to pick this location with our two task forces, with our two groups, focused on the fact that it was a neighborhood park location. And typically when we look at those types of parks, we look at the number of people that attend those facilities and those assets. Nothing too scientific, if you will, but in our experience, for example, at Bogart Street was a sort of a similar exercise that we went through. There's street parking. There's certainly limited parking on site as well. But it was, it was part and parcel of the comparison between the other sites, if you will, and available land. So we understand that there might be, we did get some feedback that we may need additional parking here, but we thought that with the cooperation with the DSBN, it would be sufficient. So.
And thank you to the DSBN for allowing us to use the parking lot in July and August. However, there's 5 to 6 weeks where obviously school is in session and that parking lot is full. The accessibility issues from the school parking lot to the Splashpad are also going to be difficult. So I also would like to make an amendment that the 2023 capital budget be amended to include $100,000 for the additional 10 parking spots in Secord Woods Park, and that staff report back on funding sources for the council's consideration, simply because I know after talking to many people in the neighborhood in around St. Christopher's School and on the other side of Carriage Road that they are planning on using the Splashpad, especially as the report says the summers are getting hotter and a lot more people are going to be wanting to use something like the Merritton Splashpad.
Okay. Now, I'm going to look at staff. Is it possible for this? Well, actually, first question. Councilor Miller, friendly? Can I ask a question? Just wait. You're not red.
I'm going to be in a sec. Oh,
there we go.
Can I ask a question first before I make that decision? Of staff.
Yes, you can.
If we didn't include this as we're building it, could we add the parking at a future date? Or is this sort of like do it now or don't do it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we can add the parking in a future date. I believe staff have looked at the site and arranged the park amenities in a way that we could continue to add amenities to the park as it continues to grow. And parking, I believe, was one of those amenities that we looked at.
Okay, I'm going to say not friendly because I'd rather see us do it first and see if we need the parking.
Okay, I need everybody to pause for 1 second. So this is an unfriendly amendment. I have Councillor Townsend and Councillor Phillips are still to speak with respect to the main motion. I'm going to clear the queue now, and we are just going to debate the amendment at the bottom of the screen. So Councillor Townsend and Councillor Phillips, you have not lost your spots. When we come back to the main amendment, it'll be Councillor Townsend and then Councillor Phillips. We're now simply discussing this amendment here. Councillor Townsend, you are up first to speak to the amendment. Anybody who'd like to speak to the amendment, please add yourself to the list at this time. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm going to declare a conflict on any partnership, on-site parking partnership with DSBN, as I am employed with them. So I'm wondering if we can separate out that part of the motion so that I can vote specifically on the part with the splash pad.
When the time comes, if it is still a part of the motion, we can definitely separate it out to allow for anybody who may have a conflict of interest. Is there anybody else who's thinking? All right, so Councillor Williamson is indicating a pecuniary interest. So at this stage of the game, I guess I'm declaring a pecuniary conflict of interest as well, as I am on a leave of absence from the Niagara Catholic District School Board. So I'm gonna look to the Deputy Mayor to come on up into the big chair, and I'm gonna go hang out while we talk about this particular amendment.
Councilor Lindell?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to staff, would it be more expensive to include this into the budget now, or would it be more expensive to wait another 2 or 3 years and then try and do a parking lot then?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, there are economies of scale when we're able to carry out more work in a project. However, we also are in a very volatile environment right now with regards to construction costs, and I don't know if those costs will be going up or down as time progresses. So it's a difficult question to answer, but generally, if prices remain the same, it is more efficient to be able to do everything all at once.
As much as I love debating with my fellow ward councillor, I think that this is probably a better idea than if minimizing costs if we do this now as opposed to waiting and trying to figure out. My real concern is the people walking across the street to get to the splash pad and the accessibility issues that come from using the school parking lot.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dodge?
Oh.
Just trying to figure out how to work these things, but that's okay. We'll get used to it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to staff, I can see both kind of sides to this argument. For me, I'm going to take it to the green side. I really don't want to see us paving over any more green space if we don't have to. And I tend to lean with Councillor Miller on this and waiting to see whether we actually have a need for those 10 extra parking spaces. And I don't really know like the space that it would take and stuff like that, but I'm thinking that I don't really want to see any park space taken up by more parking. So that would be my comments.
Thank you, Councillor.
That was it.
Go ahead, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thanks. Just to build on that, anyone who was on council last time remembers anytime we talked about paving green space, the response from the public was generally incredibly negative. So I think we do have to be cautious with that. The other thing, and honestly, I'm not certain how much 10 parking spots is going to make a huge difference here. Though there is some overlap between the school year and let's call it the splash pad season. Kids are in school during the school year, so I don't think the splash pad's going to be too popular between 9 a.m. and about 3 p.m. on weekdays, so I don't think there's too much concern there. And again, I think there's already a little bit of concern about taking away some of the green space for the splash pad, which is ours to do, and is our right to do. But I'm just not sure how much we're really even going to open up. Maybe there'll be more staff from Applewood will park on site if we provide 10 additional spots. So I don't think the need has been established yet, and I think that's sort of what the staff recommendation is, and we should be supporting that. And then we have the ability in the future, if there are issues that come up, to add the parking then. So that's my opinion on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions or concerns, turn this to the clerk to call the vote, please.
So this is just on the amendments for the $100,000 for the parking.
Correct.
Councillor Lindell. Yes. Councillor McPherson. No. Councillor Miller. No. Councillor Kushner.
No.
Councillor Harris. Can you turn your mic off? Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Dodge. No. Councillor Ratzlaff.
No.
Councillor Steve and Deputy Mayor Phillips.
No.
And that's lost. So we'll just call everybody back in, and then we'll continue the debate on the main motion.
All right, so turn off the voting mode. I have Councillor Townsend to the main motion as it appears on the screen, followed by Councillor Phillips. If there's anybody else who does want to be added to the speakers list, you can do so at this time. Councilor Townsend is up. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my question, I guess, would go either to the mayor, mayor's office staff, city staff, or the councilors. I can see that there's been approximately 67 residents who came forward in regards to the location. Was there any backlash on the location, or most residents in the neighborhood satisfied with the chosen location?
I will speak briefly on behalf of the mayor's office and say simply that I don't believe we received any correspondence in opposition. I will look to Mr. Christie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, of the total number of respondents, we didn't have anybody say, please don't put it here, but they did raise questions about traffic, calming, and parking, and those types of things, but nobody opposed.
Okay. And the councilors, ward councilors, had any feedback?
I'm going to, Council Coordinator, if you could just help Councilor Miller.
Yeah, we had a couple sessions, including a session on site. There were concerns, as Mr. Christie noted, and there's probably never going to be consensus on anything, but generally it seems that the neighborhood is supportive of that site. There are other parts of the ward that maybe would have liked to see it there, but the Rec Master Plan did a lot of work on selecting a location, and this one was chosen as the best option.
All right. Any other comment? All right, so.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second here. No, I'm getting through here. Councilor Phillips. I did it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as the refrigeration situation is concerned, I'm concerned about the fact that the project's going to be delayed, but I would think because Port Dalhousie is going to be getting the next splash pad, that's something that could be considered for that one. The Recreation Master Plan and the Aquatics group that we're looking after this, we indicated that each ward would get a splash pad. Port Dalhousie, because they have a pool, is one of the last ones. That's why Merritton is the second last one. But maybe that's the time when staff could explore the cost of a refrigeration plant. Water recycling also, I know, is I've heard two things about that as far as good or bad, but and as well, I'd just like to thank the Recreation Master Plan Committee led by Jim Richardson and the Aquatics Committee. They've done a really good job in looking for, they just don't draw a name out of a hat. They visit these sites and find out which one is the best in the ward. They did that at Grantham, now they've done it in Merritton, so kudos to them.
Thank you, Councillor. I will say, based on the back and forth, I think we can get the report back with information without impacting the timelines. I think the information can come to us. If we decide we want to go in that direction with this splash pad, that would change the timeline at that time. But I think just having the information, I think, is good to exactly the point that you made. If we decide not to use it in this instance, we can then use it in a future instance. But having the information is a good request. And I will echo your comments with respect to the Recreation Master Plan Committee, headed by our friend Jim Richardson. Councillor Miller, followed by Harris.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the Recreation Master Plan Committee. It's been, I think I had a conversation with Bill, I don't know, 2019 about the process of how this happens that led to the larger, it rolled into the aquatic strategy. And I think last term council did a really good job with that. That was complicated. And I think we chose a really good path forward. And definitely want to thank my former ward mate, Councillor Littleton, who was really supportive of this, and my new ward mate, Councillor Lindell, who's been great at engaging with residents on this. And I will point out Port Dalhousie has a lake and a beach, which Merritton hasn't come to Merritton yet. I'll look forward to to Merritton Beach opening up at some point to make everything equitable. But yeah, I appreciate all the support you've given to Merritton on this one, and hopefully we can approve this tonight and get this open next year. So thank you.
Oh, I'm up.
Councillor Harris, I can't wait.
Well, I just wanted to go back to 2010. I believe you were on council. Some of you were on council, and we had a talk about Burgoyne Woods, and we closed Burgoyne Woods with the idea that it wasn't accessible. And I see that we're doing stuff to make other pools accessible. So we closed the pool in Burgoyne Woods because it wasn't accessible, and we removed anything. Has there ever been any thought, because I think that was it 2014 or 2010? 2014, okay.
I would love.
It was the first
I
term
would
of-
love to push it back to 2010 because I believe the budget chair of the day was Peter Secord, and I'd be happy to pin him with that decision.
I guess what I'm wondering is, at that time, the previous mayor, we closed it, and there was going to be all this talk about a destination pool and all that kind of stuff. Has there been any talk about anything in Burgoyne Woods, since it's very underused, the park now, that there's no pool or splash pad or anything?
I'll look to Mr. Christie. While this is not directly related to the motion at hand, it's a little off topic. If we could get a little bit of an update on the aquatic strategy.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So that site hasn't been identified for any new construction. We're, just like our park renewal program, we're trying to renew our aquatic sites just to get them to meet code. And just for clarity, the Burgoyne Woods pool at that time, I believe it was 2015, it wasn't just about accessibility. The rate of filtration for the water at that pool was not meeting code, and so we had to make some very difficult decisions.
Okay, I remembered it a little differently, because I remember a lot of the talk at council was about accessibility. But so I guess my next question is, how do we get the word out that we want a pool there? How do we lobby you to get a pool there? How's that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think you just did, Councillor. I think as part of our recreation master plan, which needs an update, we owe you, Council, an update of that document. And within that document, we'll live the aquatic strategy. I think in the next iteration of that, we will definitely speak to that site in particular, and about a destination pool or something similar to that.
And if I could suggest, Councillor, actually, it would probably be a good idea then to also make an appointment to sit with the Recreation Facilities Master Plan Committee and speak to them directly. It might not be a bad idea to get yourself on the agenda to a future meeting.
So I can lobby them with Councillor Kushner.
Frankly, I think they'd be excited to have you.
I think they would. Thank you.
I will say, though, to Mr. Christie's point, while accessibility was identified with the Burgoyne Woods pool as being a concern, the larger issue, and I will credit Parks, Recreation and Culture Services Director of the Day, Oakes, for letting council know at the time that one of the biggest concerns with the pool was the water filtration system, and the fact that it was not meeting code, and had we not closed it, it might have been closed down anyways for that reason. So as much as it was a very difficult decision of the day, and one I would still love to be able to push onto now Regional Councillor Secord's shoulders, it was, I think, a necessary decision at the time. I see Councillor Phillips, so I'm going to switch to Councillor Phillips, and then I think we're going to call the roll.
Just to comment, the aquatics program, recreation, or the Parks and Recreation Committee has indicated that before a destination pool, and there is quite talk about getting a destination pool somewhere, your park wasn't necessarily mentioned, but it's been identified that we need another aquatic facility similar to the Kiwanis Aquatic Facility before we need a destination pool, something that's going to be open 12 months a year.
That is true. And with that, I will look to the, wow, you folks snuck right in under the radar there. Councillor Garcia, followed by Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if, since we're talking pools and recreational master plan, this is an appropriate time to ask for an update on what's happening with the Y and those negotiations with that developer? I know I'd like to get an update, but I don't know if.
Counselor, I'm going to ask if maybe we can park that particular one to the next council meeting and have an actual time set aside for a formal update, maybe give staff some time to prepare information.
Okay.
In all fairness, I wouldn't want to put anybody on the spot this evening. But if we could hold that for 2 weeks to the February 13th meeting, I'm sure Mr. Christie would be thrilled to come back with a presentation.
Fair enough. We definitely need an update, but thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Counselor. And Councilor Williams, it was. No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that we are able to give Mr. Christie some time to put thoughts together. If there's nothing else now, I will look to the clerk to call the roll, and I will thank Councilor Harris for opening up multiple cans of worms during that particular debate.
Councilor Miller.
Yes.
Councilor Lindell.
Yes.
Councilor Harris. Yes. Councilor Dodge.
Yes.
Councilor Garcia.
Yes.
Sorry. Councilor Kushner.
Yes.
Councilor McPherson. Yes. Councilor Phillips.
Yes, with no delay.
If too many people turn their microphones on at once, then there's an issue. That's what happens. Councilor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councilor Townsend.
To the splash pad, yes. Parking, though.
That was
declaring it
lost.
Thank you.
Councilor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, moving on to motions. Item 10.1, securing Canada's $1 billion investment in a strengthened freshwater action plan. Moving the motion is Councillor Phillips, and seconding the motion is Councillor Townsend. It's good to know at least two councillors care about water. Councillor Phillips, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor, thank you. It's an extensive motion. The organization, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence group, I was at their conference last year at White Oaks, and this group extends from Rimouski to the Lakehead, very active group. And this, I'm sure, speaks for every city and town on the Great Lakes. And it is just a request that the federal government uphold their previous announcement. They're going to be donating a great deal of money towards maintaining the quality of water in the Great Lakes Basin. And all I'm asking is that Council endorse this, and as well I've asked, as well as sending it to the various ministries of the federal government, that we send it to the headquarters of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Initiative so they can disperse this to all members of the organization. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. It will be sent to local MPs as well. I want to thank Councillor Phillips for bringing this forward. Just so all are aware, St. Catharines has held a board seat with the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway Cities Initiative. I screw up the acronym every time, but we have maintained that board seat. So St. Catharines does still have a seat at the board, as Deputy Mayor mentioned. It encompasses a great number of municipalities bordering the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Seaway. And this is really just asking for the federal government, as was stated, to commit the dollars they have said in the past they were going to commit, and to look to the federal government to strengthen and fund appropriately the Freshwater Action Plan, which I think we can all agree is a gateway to the Welland Canal and the rest of the Great Lakes system. It's important.
Mr. Mayor, would you include MP Badaway?
MP Badaway, yes. MP Badaway and MP Biddle are on the list. And Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councilor Phillips, is there a way to, pardon me, to ensure that this, excuse me, that this goes to all municipalities that front on the Great Lakes? Or?
Well, what I'm asking for is that this be delivered to the chair of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Initiative, and I forget the gentleman's name, former NBA player, and The conference this year is in Chicago, I know. He's from a smaller city in the States. But anyways, the headquarters will receive this, and we will direct them to send it to every member of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Initiative so they can see that we're supporting this, and hopefully they're going to be able to copy this and send it something similar to that to the federal government. That's my goal.
Thank you. And when you mention Chicago, is this a binational effort, or is it only our?
No, it's binational.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we met with members from Milwaukee and Duluth and Chicago last year. It was an excellent, one of the best conferences I've ever been at.
And for the record, it's Mayor McKinney from Zion, Illinois.
Mayor McKinney, that's right. Yes, and he did play in the NBA. I think he played 1 year with the Chicago Bulls when Michael Jordan was a rookie or something like that. But he's quite a gentleman to meet.
Yes, very much so. And just for clarity's sake, it will be distributed also. The members are all bordering both of many of the Great Lakes. And so the last clause here that Councillor Phillips asked to be added was that it be distributed to all member municipalities. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an important initiative. I fully support it, but protection of the Great Lakes goes beyond just the federal government, of course, and decisions that we make that affect Oak Ridge's moraine and all kinds of other waterways and tributaries that feed into Lake Ontario and the Great Lakes also need to be protected as well. And it does talk about invasive species, and if a certain invasive species gets past the Chicago Ship Canal, the Great Lakes will be in a big world of hurt because we still have substantial commercial fisheries, and it would expand beyond the Great Lakes and get into lots of other watersheds. So it's important, and this is a preventative kind of a thing that we need to be doing, preventative actions that we need to be taking. So I'm fully supportive, but it's also other levels of government that have to take some ownership in this as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes,
And that's carried.
unanimously. Wonderful. I'm glad I'll be able to report back to the board that we were unanimous. Moving on to 11, which is calls for notice of motion. I have 3 notices of motion that are here. I'm just going to turn it over once in turn to each of the councilors that are putting forward a notice of motion. So I'll look first to Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A notice of motion, basically a direction to staff to establish a meeting with MP Biddle, Transport Canada staff, St. Lawrence Seaway senior staff, to discuss the importance of ensuring that the bridges of Port Weller and Carleton are not raised simultaneously in order to ensure safety for the residents of Port Weller East. And of course, well, Councillor Dodge, myself, and senior staff, I would hope would be at that meeting also.
Agreed. So that's a notice of motion coming at the next meeting. Councillor Townsend, we have a notice of motion from you, if you would like to speak to it, with respect to continued support for Ukraine as the first anniversary of the war comes.
Yeah, it's a motion to support 1 year following the invasion. So just, yeah, it'll be on the agenda and council will hopefully support it.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. And then Councillor Dodge.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. I actually have 3 quick things, and one of them is a notice of motion. And while I know it's a regional issue, I would like to put forward a notice of motion. Okay, you know what I mean. About ambulance offload times that pose a risk to our public safety, to our community. Ambulances and paramedics are being tied up for too long waiting to hand over patients to medical staff at hospitals across the province. And this is something that our council should be made aware of. And every minute counts when it comes to waiting for an ambulance, for sure.
Appreciate that, and I'm going to ask my office to circulate the regional reports that have come. I mentioned in conversation with Councillor Dodge today, this has been, it was one of the first issues I dealt with when I moved to regional council last year. There have been a couple of reports, so I'll make sure that all councillors have access to that in the run-up to the next council meeting when the motion comes.
Okay, thank you. And then this was something that we spoke about a little bit earlier, and that was about the task force, or whatever we're going to call it, for the information on the amalgamation. Can we have the information back by next council meeting for that? So that, I mean, I don't know how much more, we're going to get information anyway, but so that we can be ready to start working on that as soon as possible?
So I think the direction to staff was to circulate the staff report and the terms of reference from that committee that was in place. I think if that's circulated between now and the next meeting, we can make our request for whatever type of committee or task force or whatever we're going to call it. We can make that at the next meeting so we can be ready. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
And then I just have one last thing. I know that I'm probably out of order. I should have asked for this earlier, but can I get something put on for in camera, personnel to do with a person?
Can we hold on to that? And then when we no, I mean, when we get to the in-camera section, I'll let you raise that with the clerk so we can get it up on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't trying to put you off, I promise. All right, so we're moving on now to item 12, which is report requests, and I know that Councillor Lindell had a report request this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like a report that staff report back on amending bylaw 95-302, a bylaw to provide for the licensing and regulating the keeping of dogs, to require that dogs on a front yard or front porch of a property be supervised by an adult so long as the dog is in the front yard or front porch, and that the report include information on the administration of the bylaw and potential fines for violations of the bylaw.
Okay, so we have the movers, Councillor Lindell. Do we have a seconder for that report? Councillor Williamson. All right, we'll do this. I guess I'm going to be the clerk for a moment. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then the second, sorry, Councillor Garcia, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just, my question earlier about getting an update at the next meeting regarding negotiations with the Y, do I need a report request for that? Or?
I would suggest we don't want a report request. That might lengthen the timeline between when we can actually have it. I think maybe just a memo that can be discussed at the next council meeting as a part of correspondence.
Super.
Okay.
Thank you.
The second report request that we had was legal implications of the 2023 Ontario Superior Court Decision 670. That's moved by Councillor Miller, and I will admit I don't know what that is, so.
Region Waterloo had a bylaw about encampments in parks that allowed them to remove and fine people who were encamping in parks in violation of it. They received an injunction in the Superior Court. Basically said they weren't allowed to remove encampments if they didn't have sufficient shelter beds in the region. Of course, we know that encampments get removed here, so I'm just curious if there's legal implications for the city because of this decision.
Okay, so that's a report request from Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Ratzlaff. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I'll just let the clerk know the first one was carried as well. I clerked really well for a second there. We'll go on to item 13, which is committee and task force minutes. We have the minutes of the advisory committees of council. Can I have a mover and a seconder for those? Councillor Townsend, Councillor Garcia. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. And now item 14, which is the closed session, and I will look to the clerk to explain to us why we're going in camera.
So the first item is from a motion to go into closed session for, is from the CAO. It's property matter regarding potential acquisition, closed pursuant to Municipal Act Section 239(2)C, regarding Port Weller East access options. The second item is something that Councillor Dodge is requesting to be considered tonight, and that's regarding legal advice regarding fictitious correspondence. And that would be under Municipal Act Section 239(2), sorry, working on my best, to F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
So motion to go in camera, Councilor Garcia, seconded by Councilor McPherson. All those in favor? Opposed? Off we go. All right, council is resuming from closed session. We have a motion arising from the closed session, Chief Administrative Officer, Property Matter, Acquisition, Port Weller East Access Options. The recommendation moved by Councillor Dodge, seconded by Councillor Phillips, is that staff proceed as directed in closed session. And I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Dodge. Yes. Councillor Phillips. Yes. Councillor Garcia. Yes. Councillor Kushner. Yes. Yeah, it takes a minute. So Councillor Kushner, sorry.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
No.
Councillor Lindell.
No.
Councillor McPherson.
No.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
No.
Councillor Townsend.
No.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
The second motion is simply a motion to receive the information as presented in camera. And this was Councillor Dodge's request. So Councillor Dodge, you're making this motion to receive the information as presented?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and follow up with what was recommended to me.
Yeah. And is there a seconder for this, just to receive? Okay, so Councillor Williamson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Motion, we're on to bylaws. That the bylaws listed on the council agenda as A to F be read a first time, considered and passed, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and the clerk. Moved by Councillor Miller and seconded by Councillor Harris. Just the bylaws. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then there's an additional bylaw A, be read at first time, considered and passed, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 89, 2000, entitled, a bylaw regulating traffic and parking on city roads, one reading with respect to truck prohibition, Broadway and Parkside Drive, delegation of powers and duties, bylaw number 2020-156. Councillor Phillips and Councillor Dodge, first and second. All those in favor? Opposed?
Mr. Mayor, I was going to ask a question before. I'm in favor of it, obviously. Will there be a fine for trucks that are going to be using Broadway and Parkside when they're driving on that, on heavy duty?
Mr. Martuccio?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe there is a fine. These bylaws are difficult to enforce.
So if we catch a truck driving on Parkside, there's nothing we can do about it, basically. It's a bylaw without any power.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if trucks are in the area because they are doing business in the area, such as construction, or it's their only access to a business in the area, we cannot prohibit them from being in that area. These types of bylaws are effective only for vehicles that should not be using these roads for any sort of business in the area.
So is there going to be really concrete signage that it's going to indicate such to these trucks so that they know they can't go down there?
So, Mr. Mayor, yes, we will be putting up all the signage that to try to prohibit these vehicles from entering the restricted area.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Last one's motion to adjourn. Who wants it? I want it. Councillor Kushner, Councillor McPherson, all those in favor? Opposed? Good night.